Coming up on this special edition of the 1st Corps Field Report, the 1st Corps commander talks with his senior leaders about shifting focus to the Pacific. And we reflect on the stories that were most memorable for us throughout the last year. Hello and welcome to this special Year in Review edition of the 1st Corps Field Report. I'm Army Sergeant Mitch Ternay. Our first story features 1st Corps Commander Lieutenant General Robert Brown discussing the future of our mission here on JBLM with his senior leaders. Army Sergeant Nydia Cruz has the story.
To prevent and shape.
1st Corps soldiers can expect some major changes to their mission in the coming year. To discuss these changes, 1st Corps Commanding General Lieutenant General Robert Brown gathered command teams from across JBLM. Some of the most talked about changes were the shift in focus to the Pacific Rim and a change of pace for the Stryker Brigades.
The 3 Stryker Brigades, as they come back, and they won't deploy again, that's a commitment. They're going to be assigned and they're going to go to exercises.
Brown also discussed possible training events in the Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia. He emphasized real-world scenarios where he intends to cut down response times and work with maritime allies more closely.
Things that we've got to put our thinking caps on, operating from a maritime platform. Marines couldn't do it alone. Special Ops couldn't do it alone. Navy couldn't do it alone. You would need Army forces to assist on things like vessel boarding. Not much different than MOUT, only it's a ship.
After his brief, the general opened the floor and fielded questions covering budget cuts, reducing sexual assault, and improving soldier services on post. For the 1st Corps Field Report, I'm Army Sergeant Nydia Cruz.
We are ready.
Up next is a story about a time-honored cavalry tradition and the kinds of challenges soldiers will overcome in order to earn their spurs. Staff Sergeant David Chapman has more.
My story that I chose was the 8-1 Cav spur ride in February. It's an opportunity for Cav soldiers and Cav support soldiers to earn their spurs, their silver spurs. This event was 18 hours of challenging tasks, skills, mental, physical challenges, and it basically just exhausted them until it came down to the final ruck march. And they finished and then were presented their silver spurs for the first hour or so of events that they did. Seeing them out in this big parade field, middle of the night, it was 3 o'clock in the morning, it was pouring down rain. All these soldiers looked like they were flashing back to basic training. They got people screaming at them, they're low crawling in the mud, rolling around in the mud. The spur holders, the guys who already had their spurs, were out there, the ones that were ordering around and telling them to do these different tasks and things. And despite the rain and the slop and the physical challenges that they were already being put through within the first hour, many of them were so cool and motivated and high speed out there, nothing was getting them down. They were loud and proud and doing whatever was told. And it was fun to watch that and see that exceptional amount of motivation no matter what they were doing. And then watching as the day progressed through the different challenges and the different mental tests that they were having to do with little sleep and, fast food, maybe an MRE here or there wherever they could, seeing it start to take a little bit of a toll on their thought processes and things. Something as simple as, field stripping an M16 suddenly with cold fingers and frazzled nerves and mental capacity, diminishing, it got to become a real challenge for some of them. And then down to the last stretch, the last 12-mile ruck march to finish it out. The guys who made it to that point, the men and women soldiers that made it to that point, it was real inspirational to see them pushing through to the end. Nobody was falling out. Again, it goes back to the fact that it was an accomplishment. Their buddies were, pushing each other to keep going, take the next step, get around that next corner. You're almost down to the downhill stretch. The end was very inspirational to come across the tracks at Solo Point. And, they had all the strikers out, the music was playing, and the soldiers were coming across the tracks, with the commanders and everybody, and the spur holders standing on the side of the road, just waiting to welcome home and present them their spurs at the end of it all. So it was exciting to watch the culmination of it.
Stories can be unpredictable, sometimes taking on a life of their own after they leave the hands of the reporter.
I'd never spent so much time on anything. So it was more or less, in my opinion, it was a long-term project, even though it was only, 2.5, 3 months. But it was long-term. I'd always kind of wanted to do something like this, find a family that I could follow around for maybe the last few months of their soldier's deployment, portray some of the struggles, some of the challenges that they've dealt with, and then lead into his return and just build it up to this triumphant, great thing. So back in August, just one day, I randomly got the thought in my head, maybe I'll contact 3-2, because I had just done a story on some Purple Heart award ceremony with their rear D. So I contacted their rear D, and I told them what I wanted to do, and I told them that I really would need a lot of access to the family. So they identified 3 families for me, and I took the first one. What sold me on that family was the ages of the children. It was their 4th deployment, as opposed to the other 2, I think it was like 1st or 2nd. But just what they had endured. We'd been meeting up for various things. I mean, I went into their kids' schools, shot in there for a few days, multiple times at the house. I even went to Walmart with the spouse, just randomly one time. And just got really close to him. And, there's a lot that we talked about that isn't on camera and that's not in audio, like deep, personal things, just, as part of getting to know these people. She told me about her 5-year-old son, Christian, and that he had some struggles, and she had told me he's on this behavior chart because he has issues in school, and he misses the father figure. She said, it was just difficulties of not having his dad around, and that struck me. So I kind of coordinated with the teachers, principals, and all that to get in there and shoot. And so I just happened to be shooting out at recess. I was kind of staying like a fly on the wall as much as I could, and he just got upset with this kid, pushed him down, and so they put him in timeout. And so I immediately went over there, and that photo probably touched me more than anything. That series of photos, because here's a kid he's just not all there. His dad's gone, and he's over there with him.
We're going to color this nicely with the right colors. Normally, I don't tell you what colors.
There's a school of thought where you get that photo, and it says so much, and it's just maybe it would tear up the subjects, because they might not want that in a paper or something or in a piece. But what's it going to do for everybody who sees it? Public understanding. And that's the way I tend to look at everything. I feel like our job is to portray the sacrifices, that these families endure, and how am I doing that if I'm not letting people see this stuff?
The setting of our next story is a pirate-themed weekend at American Lake, and the families and volunteers who came together to show their support for the Exceptional Family Member Program. Sergeant Sarah Enos reflects on her experiences there.
The usual story that I go out and cover might only be a couple hours, and it's hard to get soldiers or people to feel comfortable talking to you or getting down to a personal level. The camp was held at the American Lake, Lakeside Cabins on Joint Base Lewis McChord. About 100 exceptional family member registered for the event. 12 got to spend the night. I think it made my writing different, or made it a little bit more fun, because they did use a theme. Pirates of the American Lake. My favorite photos were the ones that had expression in the children's faces, or the idea of family in general. One particular picture was a little boy named Aaron, who's in the EFMP program. He was interacting with their fake skeleton that was part of a prop for the pirates, and asking the skeleton if he was okay, and talking to him and laughing, and I took some pictures and I just got the expressions. He just seemed so entertained and happy with that fake toy that was just supposed to be their prop for decoration. Another picture that I really liked was a little boy who was looking at his dad after they caught fish. They were able to do fishing, and they brought a bunch of trout in a little square. And whenever they caught a trout, the little boy looked at his dad like, "Oh my gosh, I caught this trout." It was challenging because I wanted to capture so much. I stayed the weekend with the EFMP camp. I got to experience the nights, the breakfast, the entire day, and then that night again. I got to see the families warm up to one another, especially on the second night, and the kids running around playing in the fields. And they warmed up to me more after the second night, because they got to know me and see that I was following them around with the camera and asking for interviews and just asking them their story.
That's it for this edition of the Field Report. Tune in next time for part 2 of our Year in Review coverage. To see these stories and more, check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/5thMPAC. I'm Army Sergeant Mitch Ternay, and thanks for watching.